Good afternoon. I'm Patrick Phillips. I run a website called I Want Media, iwantmedia.com, a website that aggregates news about the media business. Welcome to I Want Media's fourth annual panel discussion on the future of media. I'd like to quickly thank NYU for allowing me to host this event here today, and thank the NYU staff members and students who are helping out. And thank Livestream, who is providing a live webcast. A clip will be posted later on iwantmedia.com. For those who are compelled to tweet about the panel today, the hashtag is IWM as in I Want Media. Note cards and pens are in the chairs here in the studio and available to guests in the area outside if anybody has questions for the panelists. The cards will be collected near the end of the hour. This is I Want Media's fourth annual informal discussion on the future of media, about aiming to take a look at how the internet and digital media are influencing and transforming the traditional media world. Incidentally, I should clarify, this panel is completely unrelated to the FCC report that's coming out tomorrow, also called Future of Media, so there's no connection, it's just a coincidence. So I had the name first. I've been doing this for 4 years. But anyway, the media world, as we know, is changing fast. Actually, last year when I did this panel, Arianna Huffington was here, and she said that the Huffington Post was not for sale. So things change fast. The Huffington Post was acquired by AOL just a few months ago. And among some other notable changes in media in the past year, the New York Times, in a very high-profile move, created a paywall for its website. The Daily Beast, a 2-year-old news site, was bought and merged with Newsweek, the 77-year-old news magazine. Gawker Media, the influential blog publisher, introduced a new design template that it said would herald the evolution of the blog form itself. And the New York Observer named as its editor just a few months ago someone who got their start in journalism from a blog, which I would presume, which I'm guessing is probably one of the first to do so. Is that?
I don't know.
Not necessarily. Not anymore.
I don't think so.
And Facebook, everyone's favorite social network, emerged, according to one study, as one of the most important drivers of traffic to news websites. And we're fortunate to have with us here today some people who are directly connected to some of these changes. I'd like to introduce them. First of all, we're missing Edward Felsenthal, who said he is running late. He's the executive editor of Newsweek and the Daily Beast, but he will hopefully be joining us momentarily. But to my immediate left is Elizabeth Spires, the newly appointed, I'm sorry, I'm reading the wrong one. The editor-in-chief of the New York Observer, the weekly newspaper focusing on New York's culture, real estate, politics, and media. Previously, she was the founder of Breaking Media, where she launched websites including Dealbreaker, Above the Law, and Fashionista. She has launched new media properties for other companies as well, and she was the founding editor of Gawker, the New York City media and gossip site. Saul Hansel is the big news editor of the Huffington Post, a position he started in just a few weeks ago, I believe. His title is named after the Huffington Post's big news feature pages devoted to particular topics. Saul previously was programming director for Seed.com, AOL's open content submission platform where writers and photographers and others can submit content for publication. And prior to joining AOL, he was a technology editor with the New York Times. David Carr writes a column for the Monday Business section of the New York Times focusing on media issues, and he also works as a general assignment reporter in the culture area of the Times. But most importantly, David will soon be a bona fide movie star this summer, following the release of Page One, a documentary film about the Times, which has a particular focus on the paper's media desk. The film opens in New York next week and will soon roll out across the country. Vadim Leversik, did I pronounce that one?
Yeah.
Okay. Vadim is the newly appointed journalism program manager at Facebook. He is also an adjunct professor teaching social media at the Columbia University Graduate School of Journalism and the founder of the Community Managers Meetup. Prior to Facebook, Vadim worked as the community manager and social media strategist at the social media site Mashable. And before Mashable, he worked on social media at the New York Times. Last but not least, Remy Stern, who is the current editor-in-chief of Gawker. He joined Gawker early last year when Gawker Media acquired CityFile, an online compendium of big names in New York media and business circles. Remy founded City Life in 2008, and he is also the author of But Wait, There's More, a book about the infomercial and home shopping industries. David, I'd like to start the conversation with you, since, as I said, you're going to be, since you're our panel's movie star here this summer.
Sort of like being the tallest leprechaun. It's not really that big of a deal.
You're modest already. Well, according to, I was looking at the website for Page One, the official website, and I mean the description about the movie. It says that it chronicles the transformation of the media industry at this time of great turmoil. Writers like the salty but brilliant David Carr, salty but brilliant, track print journalism's metamorphosis even as their own paper struggles to stay vital and solvent. I haven't seen the movie, but I mean, there's a clip. I mean, there's a preview available online, and there's one scene in the clip where, like, you're in a car and you look like you're driving, I think, and you say, "Could the New York Times go out of business?" Do you answer that question in the movie?
Absolutely not. No,
No.
I'm kidding. I think the answer has come in the form of what's happened since the movie traces a time in 2009 when both the sort of secular part of the business and cyclical part of the business, meaning there was a flight away from traditional media, and there also was a downturn in overall spending. It came at a really rugged time for everybody, including us. We ended up taking a short-term loan at high rates from Carlos Slim, who's a Mexican industrialist, and I think that set people to thinking that we were fundamentally imperiled, and I think people wrote some fairly ill-considered and intemperate things, partly because, I don't want to mention names, Michael Hirschhorn, Henry Blodgett, what they were doing is not only suggesting that the New York Times would go out of business, but hoping that it would, and I just sort of wonder, I'm not saying that we aren't tendentious in some of the ways we execute our news, and as the movie documents, we've made some very significant mistakes, but how is it that it's a good thing, a civic good for something like the New York Times to go out of business? If you look at us, right now we're scheduled to pay that loan back early. Second quarter numbers look good. Paywall is on plan, as they would say. And right before I came up to this panel, I said goodbye on the sidewalk to Tim Marengo, who's also in the film, and he's leaving tonight for Baghdad, where our bureau continues to storm along. One of the few news outfits that still sees Iraq as an important story when, you know, billions of U.S. dollars and hundreds and thousands of U.S. lives have been spent there. And he's not going there to just keep the light on. He's going to be doing big, important stories. So the answer to is the New York Times going to go out of business? I'd say absolutely not. I think the market for branded information, I think, continues to grow, and I think the opportunity to find a way to make money on that, including the metered model that we're doing, which I support and think is a good idea. I would say trends are good. Doesn't mean it's not a hand-to-hand fight every day. We're in a lot of small businesses. We're trying to squeeze money out of everybody we encounter. But in general, I'd say our future is solid.
Why is the paywall a good idea for the Times?
Well, a couple of things. One is if you cover media and you were looking at the trend lines in terms of our cost structure, probably about 2015, 2016, the way things were going, we probably wouldn't be able to cash flow. And so we've relied more and more on consumers. We we have, 800,000 people who renew no matter what. We sell 2 million copies every Sunday. But then we have 40 million uniques who stop by every single month. And some portion of those people are absolutely dedicated New York Times readers. And I think it was very important that we find a way to perform a cashectomy on them, that we find a way to squeeze money out of them. 80% of our readers won't notice any difference, but for those 20%, they keep bumping up against, they get to 20 stories and we say, hey, how's about showing us a little sugar here? What do you say? Not only do we derive very significant revenues out of them, it could be a huge business if we got to say 500,000 paying subscribers, but we end up with a new business behind that where these customers are fenced off so that when Gawker or HuffPo replicates part of our content, right? They can't really replicate our audience exactly. We have people that have opted in and that we know a lot about, and a new ad business, a premium ad business, is created behind that wall. So it's not just consumer revenues, but advertising revenues as well. Sorry for the big infomercial. I'll knock it off.
But would the paywall you say is a good idea for the Times? Would that work for other newspapers? Or is the Times special?
Well, I pay
the Wall Street
I
Journal?
pay the Wall Street Journal. I pay the FT. I could probably find the stories that I pull out of there if I
Wait, you live in New Jersey, right?
Yeah,
Well, what's your local paper?
Star Ledger.
Okay, would you pay for that online?
Well, I would assume I would get it because I pay for the paper all the time. I mean, I get 4 newspapers at my house.
So you would pay for it online? Of course, you're a journalism guy, so.
Yeah, but I don't expense it. I mean, it's media and info. I live in New Jersey, which is.
Do you think a paywall would work for your local New Jersey paper?
Not in exactly the same way that it works for us. I think the regional formula, I think very small community-oriented papers could do very well on the web. Very large national news brands could do well on the web with pay models. I think the regional model is tough, and they're going to have to offer maybe using sports as kind of a Trojan horse in the way, because they're up against so much competition from where Saul works, from wherever that and much of the information that they're dealing with is a kind of commodity, in a way that a sort of reports from our Baghdad bureau are probably not.
Elizabeth, as editor of the New York Observer, would you consider a paywall?
No.
Why not?
It's not strictly speaking my decision, but I don't like the idea. I think the way the Observer works, it's a small regional newspaper. For the paper, our circulation is around 52,000. And we can goose that up a little bit, but it's not nearly as scalable as, say, the web model. And giving away content for free is also one of the best marketing tools that we have. And we have a very unique audience in terms of who the demographic is, so we monetize in a slightly different way. And our readers tend to be discreetly in New York. They tend to be highly affluent. So the kind of ads that we sell against the Observer are not necessarily the sort of ads that you would sell against a normal regional newspaper, but having things online and not behind a paywall offers a level of scalability that we wouldn't get if we had one.
So how do you monetize your audience?
Well, if you look at the Observer, both in print and online, you'll notice that we have a lot of luxury advertising, which is unusual for a small regional newspaper. And that's entirely a sale against the demographic that reads it. So.
Nick Denton, the head of Gawker Media, was on this panel a few years ago, and he had said that Gawker would never add paywalls to their sites because they cause journalists to fall out of the discussion. Is that, I'm sure that he still feels that way. I'm guessing. Is that still the case?
That is still the case. No plans for a paywall as far
that you've heard of. David, I mean, do you fear that behind the paywall you would fall out of the discussion?
Well, back when they did Times Select, I had just become a columnist at the New York Times, and they were putting some of the columnists behind the paywall, and I was like, boy, I am not Maureen Dowd. I am, I am not Gretchen Morgensen. I am not Joe Nocera. I'm like David Schmeckler. Please don't put me behind that wall. No one will ever pay for me. This time around, we're all sort of holding hands and going across together, and there were predictions our traffic would drop 80%, 90%, 70%. What is it off, really? 10%, 12%? I feel no loss of visibility. I see no fewer links on Twitter or Facebook. I still feel like we're very much in the middle of the discussion and driving things. I think the fact that the wall is leaky and that there is that people can do drive-bys on it without noticing any difference, that it has flexibility, we can turn sort of the number of views up and down on the side. I think that's sort of the way of the future. I think did things change so fast? I mean, Remy could talk about this, but you already did. It's just like, okay, it's this way, except now it's this way, now it's that way. And I think the flexibility built into the model pretty important. So if the ad market is incredibly robust and we find a lot of leverage on price, maybe we can, up the number of views that are free and grow our audience. Or if ads continue to be sort of commodity priced and we compete against people who sell at very low rates and we end up having to do a lot of remnant business, then we can tune up the consumer side. It's nice to have both those pedals, which the newspaper business has always had.
Edward Felsenthal just joined us a little late, and I should introduce him quickly. We're glad that you could join us. Edward is I'm sorry, let me find your bio here, is the executive editor of Newsweek and the Daily Beast, responsible for overseeing the editorial team of both the Newsweekly and the website. He previously was deputy managing editor of the Wall Street Journal, where he spent 15 years as an editor and reporter in New York and Washington.
Behind a paywall.
Behind the paywall. And he was founding editor of the Wall Street Journal's personal journal section, overseeing projects that led to 2 Pulitzer Prizes. Last fall, why did the Daily Beast and Newsweek are a very unusual hybrid of 2 news brands, I would think. Why did the Daily Beast need to buy Newsweek?
Well, I think it's not such an unusual hybrid when you think about, and Elizabeth was talking about demographics. I mean, they're 2 publications aimed, I think, at a very similar kind of audience, a smart, influential audience that is curious about the world. That's what we've always aimed the Daily Beast at, and it's really what Newsweek has increasingly, actually, over the years. I think that was a big part of the Meacham strategy aimed at, and we have a now unified team of web and print reporters, and actually, we're just a couple of months into this, and we have a long ways to go. But I think we have, actually, having worked in a few newsrooms now myself, one of the more truly integrated digital print teams in journalism, and so we've got one team of people with, I think, a similar sensibility, aiming a print product and a web product at audiences that are by no means identical, which is good in a way, because we hope that Beast readers will subscribe to Newsweek and vice versa. But similar enough that the product has the 2 products have a coherence, and the same team of people can intelligently and engagingly do both.
This may be an obvious question, but I mean, a lot of people wonder, is a print Newsweekly magazine still relevant?
Well, we
I'm sure you feel it
obviously
is.
think so. There have been plenty of, everybody talks about The Economist. Actually, our CEO, Stephen Colvin, was really built the Week in the U.S., which has, of course, been a huge success. I mean, it's irrefutable that weeklies can be successful. The onus is on us to prove that this one can.
With the addition of the backing or the companionship of the Daily Beast with Newsweek, is Time Magazine still considered a rival, your competitor?
Well, it's funny. It is and isn't. Obviously, I didn't work at Newsweek in the era of the most intense competition between those 2 magazines. I've always had a hard time, even when we were at the Beast alone, kind of saying, well, who are your competitors? Because I think, in a weird way, everybody on this panel, we're all competitors for Time. We actually tried to hire a couple of years ago, when the Beast was maybe 6 months old or something, an SEO consultant from the Wall Street Journal, and the Journal wouldn't, part-timer there, but the Journal wouldn't let her do it because we were a competitor. And really, we were 5 months old. But I think the idea that we're all kind of after, I mean, sure, we look at time and if Times got on the cover, which, they come out earlier than we do, we're Monday and they're Friday, it's what we were, it hasn't happened yet, but I'm sure we'd regroup. But on the other hand, we both, it's not a everyday example, but we both had Bin Laden special issues, and ours a day later just because of our cycle, and it's the biggest seller by far in the 9 or 10 issues that we've done. So I think yes, but in my view, mostly no.
Okay, you have the Daily Beast and you have Newsweek. I mean, you have two strong brand names that are working together. Is one more dominant than the other? Is one more preeminent than the other? Is one going to go away?
No.
It's always going to be Newsweek and the Daily Beast.
Yeah, it's always going to be Newsweek and the Daily Beast. I mean, Newsweek is both in the U.S. and really around the world. I mean, it's a very powerful brand still, and the Beast.
But as far as online goes, the Daily Beast, is that the focus?
Newsweek, yes. We are taking a weekend, but still powerful print brand and trying to reinvigorate it while, and then we have in the Daily Beast, a very new but vibrant, fast-growing website, and so it seemed to us that you double down in the areas where each brand is the strongest. Newsweek.com will, as this integration progresses, become a channel on the Daily Beast where that's more of a long reads environment and where you can really engage with the magazine content. And the Daily Beast will continue to be the sort of front door breaking news, sort of insta response read. So that's and in terms of how we work the newsroom, we see the Beast is kind of the front door through which again, it's not so different probably from,
so you
from
don't
the
feel
way
that
the Times website works.
That doesn't create a confusion of brands. I mean, there's a front door to this, and that's.
We have a
that's
really
not an issue.
strong. So far it isn't. We've got a. I don't think it would be a good. It's probably a better question for Steve Colvin than me, but it seems to me to rename the Newsweek, the Daily Beast would be to not take advantage of the reputation and incredible legacy and familiarity, that readers around the world have with the Newsweek brand, to rename a website that's had pretty remarkable traction over 2.5 years, and has become really a must-read for a lot of people to rename that Newsweek. That would also seem to me to be a mistake. You have two really strong brands housed in one place, which is the American corporate way.
A few minutes ago, David had said that Gawker and Huffington Post tend to replicate content from the New York Times. Is that what you feel you guys do? I'm sorry, I'm not talking to you.
Oh, sorry.
I'm sorry. Or do you do that too?
I'm up.
Does the Daily Beast do that? What does Gawker and Huffington Post, do you guys replicate content from other people? Is that primarily what you guys do?
I think there's a difference between what we do and maybe what some other sites do, and that's really that it's not so much replicating content. We give things our own spin. We add a lot of attitude and opinion. We put things into context. It's not just, we're not copying and pasting, chunks of New York Times articles into our posts. And I think it's really important that we give readers that tone, that perspective. And so.
But Gawker produces original content as well.
We do.
Yeah. And so does Huffington Post. Definitely. Absolutely.
And I think on all of these axes, there are fake lines between old and new, right?
Is that a misconception that you guys just cut and paste?
Oh, absolutely. And
But there is some of that.
as there is at the New York Times and anywhere else, right? Aggregation, right? We talk about the fate of the New York Star Ledger, right? They run a lot of wire and syndicated copy. There's lots and lots of places where, the packaging of content from multiple sources in a convenient wrapper is a satisfying experience. What is the week?
But they're paying for that content.
They may or may not be. What is the CBS News or the Today Show? How much of the Today Show is the producers come in at 2 a.m., read the papers, and do stuff on that? There's a lot more people saying things than there is stuff to say in this world. And, so that the fact that, there are different economic arrangements, there are different technical arrangements that create this hybrid of a Huffington Post format where they'll run a headline and click right to an article without anything in between, or give you an option of a summary, or you rewrite one story when it's a scoop, or you rewrite and you synthesize with as much value added as you have the time and experience to add, or you pick up a telephone and you add some facts. That's the menu that we're all working with, right? I mean, when I was at the New York Times, right? Sometimes, you walk in and they say, the Journal had a story, match it. And you say, shit, I don't want to do that. And you do it anyway because your audience deserves to find that out, even if you would rather be proud and only print stuff that you discovered 100% yourself. You're serving your audience. You're not serving J-school professors or some abstraction. And I mean, I'm new to the Huffington Post, but the one thing you can say about it is people like it.
What do they like? What's
They
the appeal?
like the package. They like.
As opposed to the New York Times?
They like. They are not mutually exclusive, right? What do you get from the Huffington Post? I think the Huffington Post, as I understand it, from both the outside as a reader for a long time and on the inside, has mastered the now. They have a bunch of people and a bunch of workflow around, sensing the discussion of the minute, capturing the headline and the packaging to resonate with people and convening a conversation around it. The number of comments per article at the Huffington Post is astounding compared to any other place that I've seen. And, AOL and the New York Times both have pretty damn big audiences in the tens of millions, and the Huffington Post is connected with them in a much more engaged way.
There was a story published by Forbes.com yesterday that said the Huffington Post now has around 1,300 full-time journalists, more than either the Washington Post or the Wall Street Journal. That's a lot of people. So,
Okay.
are you?
Shame on us if we can't do something good with that, right?
So I presume someone's producing some original content somewhere.
Well, sure. I mean, a big chunk of that is Patch.
And what is? Can you tell us about Patch for those who are not familiar with Patch? What is Patch?
Patch is like building a railroad 150 years ago, and it's a very important infrastructure, and whether we make it all work or not is less important to me than the fact that somebody has got to go stick live bodies around the world to find stuff out, in addition to packaging. So we've got, Patch is a chain of, at the hyperlocal websites, so we have 800 towns, more affluent suburbs than not, but a bunch of neighborhoods in Brooklyn, a bunch, we're mixing it up a little bit, where you've got a model with a full-time editor, a little crew of freelancers, and possibly a second staff person, and a technology platform that makes it efficient and easy to write about what's going on in the town, plus a second staff that does reference information so that we don't just list every restaurant in town, we go take photographs of every restaurant and every dry cleaners, every garage, and convene a community around that. And that's just the first year, right? They just got and hired all these people. I look at this just as a journalist and as somebody goes and puts up cell towers all around the country. That's the hard part. That's the infrastructure. Now you have to think of the cool rate plan and build a handset and come up with great stuff to do with that. So not only do we have what the towns need to say to each other, which you care about what's going on in your block. You know them. And you want to know what to do with your kids on Saturday. Those are real human needs. But how else do we use all those eyes and ears to make stuff? We're doing that now. We're building a desk that connects the eyes and ears that we've got to the national publications to find trends, report stories, cover the elections. Give us a couple years to try a bunch of stuff and to make a bunch of stupid mistakes. And if we don't run out of money, how could we not find interesting things with that platform.
So you see Patch as an experiment still.
If you're not doing an experiment in this world with
Yeah.
these things, what the hell are you doing, right?
Now,
Doing the old thing is, you know.
Now these writers, these correspondents who work for Patch, these are not full-time positions.
Oh, sure they are.
Oh, they are.
Right. So this is a job. You know. So the Patch proposition is way more than full time. They're hiring somebody. I mean,
At competitive
in their
wages.
20s, at a rate that is competitive
Okay.
to what you would make. I mean, you know, the jobs that lots of us got. You know, getting out of school. I worked in New York, but you know, the job I was supposed to get, covering the school board for the local paper, you know, is a hell of a lot harder to get now. So, you know, there's a lot of people either out of J school or with a couple years of experience who are working in a town, and they have, unlike in the old days, they have a pride of authorship. They are the Montclair Patch editor or the whatever town they're in, and it's their site. They have some help from a supervisory pyramid, although it's pretty light. They've got a bunch of technology, and they recruit some unpaid freelancers, some paid freelancers, and see what they can do with it.
The Forbes.com story also mentioned that quoted some analysts saying that AOL's future depended on Patch. Why is that true?
The future.
Is that something that's
Patch is really important. It's a very large investment, and it would be damn embarrassing if the whole thing flopped and you had to close it. Oh, I don't think we'd go bankrupt.
does AOL's future depend on Patch?
No, in the sense that, I mean, AOL has done 27 zillion things over the last 25 years. It keeps changing. That's for better and for worse, that's the essential character of AOL. So if you do what turns AOL into Lehman Brothers, it's debts exceeding income and a liquidity crisis. If you had to close down Patch, which I don't foresee, it would not cause a liquidity crisis, so AOL would not go out of business. That said, a lot of the upside comes from Patch and comes from the integration, again, right? If the question here is how do you build a news organization that thrives in this very difficult economic environment, the AOL bet, and I think it makes sense, is scale, right? The more things we have against the common technology platform and a common advertising sales force, the lower the unit cost of making any one thing, and if you do it right, the higher the quality of doing any one thing. And you gotta go for that. The Times has that working for it. And I think that's as good a recipe as you're gonna have for finding, an economic point that has balance. So Patch plus Movie Phone, plus the HuffPost political coverage, plus Black Voices, plus the 25,000 other things that we do, starts to get you into the ballpark.
Remy, Gawker Media, a few months in February, unveiled a redesign of its websites, which pretty much abandoned the traditional chronological posting of items for a new look. Can you tell us briefly about that and what was the thinking behind that?
Sure. I think for a long time we had seen limitations with the blog format and specifically the reverse chronological format, which put the most recent post at the very top and didn't really give us a chance to showcase original exclusive content or bigger features that we had done. It was really about the things that we did 5 minutes ago. And as we've grown as an organization and all the sites have grown, we've been putting a lot more emphasis on original content and doing bigger things. And what you'd find is that stuff would disappear down the page as we posted, a 30-word little post. And so it was important for us to sort of figure out a way to really highlight specific things and give readers a sense of things that were important and things that they should be reading, and not have all this work that we would put into these stories just sort of disappear.
But won't readers just scroll down? I mean, that's what I used to do. I mean, when you go on a site, I know it's updated several times a day. I mean, I scroll down. I mean, I'm sure.
Some
and you
do.
scroll down, you go on to the next page, but do a lot of people?
You're a very savvy
Did not
reader.
people not scroll down? I mean, are you saying people don't scroll?
People don't scroll. People don't go to a second.
They go to the
page.
home page and they look what's there,
They
and then
see
that's as far as they
what
go.
Immediately, you know, if you look at the average amount of time that people spend on various sites, it's really not that long. I mean, people come, they see something, they click on something, they read it, and they're gone. You don't have.
So
a lot
the
of
new format
time.
is intended to highlight the hot news that you guys are the hot exclusives, whatever you
Right.
have, whatever you want to emphasize, rather than have
Right.
that buried and maybe lost on the next page.
For example, you know, we've done 20 probably posts in the last few hours, and about an hour and a half ago, we posted a photo of Anthony Weiner's penis that just surfaced this
Oh,
morning.
really?
Get a business model to support.
We would want to
I
highlight.
didn't scroll down. I
We
didn't.
would
oh
wanna
no, was that
highlight
highlighted?
that,
That's up at the top. As soon as you get
that
on,
it-
you see
yes.
his.
Well, no, you don't see it on the homepage. You have to click through.
You have to click through to
You
see
have
it.
to opt in to see the uncensored photo. We
Okay,
wouldn't-
that's good. to
We
know.
wouldn't just put that necessarily on the homepage.
Get readers apply.
But that's the kind of story.
So that
we
was
wanna
released today.
feature.
That's I
That
didn't
was
know that.
about,
I
about
haven't been
noon.
online. Okay.
Nothing like a little clickable wiener to kind of drive your traffic. Right?
The old format would
Is
have
there a way to
that story
monetize that? I mean,
pushed down the
Put a
page.
paywall around that.
We don't really monetize those stories actually because they're when they're
Is this
along
Is
those
this an
lines,
exclusive to Gawker?
no, it was a
Oh.
photo that Andrew Breitbart was on a radio show this morning and was showing the photo to people.
So you're
to see.
replicating other people's content? Is that what you're saying?
The picture was posted to Twitter this morning.
Oh, okay. All right. But what's the reaction been to this new format for Gawker Media blogs? I mean, from what I've read, that traffic has taken a dive from that.
It's been challenging. I mean, I think
So was that a good idea?
It is a good idea. I mean, the problems, the traffic were really related to tech issues that we didn't foresee. I'm sure that readers were unhappy, and there's been an adjustment process, which we've gone through as well, adjusting to this new layout, and it hasn't been easy. That said, it wasn't sort of like we changed the design and the next day, readers stopped reading the site. It was really a function of these tech issues that we've been resolving for several months now.
Well, I don't see
The
a lot of
site
other
was-
sites taking.
Patrick, there's so
Replicated
many
it.
sites that have stuff in order of importance. The Daily Beast's cheat sheet, which I love, is in order
Right.
of
I mean, it
importance.
seems
All
like you're
of the
getting
New
away
York
from the
Times
blog
section for us.
format and getting towards sort of like a
we're
traditional.
past this.
Yeah.
This whole old media, new media, the whole world here is, at this point, this whole panel, you have a bunch of companies trying to serve the audience with the full panoply of choices. Do we use paper? Do you use bits? Do you use television? Do you charge money? Do you have ads? Do you put it in chronological order, alphabetical order, or social order? We're done with these, just because we did it that way for the last 3 years, we have to assume that's a category. And it's all about building the hybrid that connects with your audience around your editorial vision. And clearly the combination of stuff they did, which was not just in order of importance, but had some technological twists. You were doing some tricks with technology that I think is really important because the whole technology platform underneath HTML is changing, and I love the experiment they're doing. I don't love the site, but they need to do it and learn from it.
We're learning from it. I mean,
Yeah.
I think
Don't
it
give 'em a
would
hard
be
time
the
for it.
biggest mistake would be not to change and to just go along the path that we've been going on.
Oh, I'd like to remind you all, if you have questions for the panelists, if you want to write them down on the cards, and someone will collect them momentarily.
I think that the iPad has brought a lot of clarity to these issues that Saul just discussed, which is when you put that cube around what you do, what we all do, we all have text, we all have video, we all have sound, and this whole kind of transmedia, the difference between what is a blog, what is a newspaper, everything is marching toward each other. To Remy's point, 10 years ago I was working at Inside.com, and Michael Hirschhorn, who already took his name in vain, said, there's large type, there's a big image, which will either be photo or video, and then there's about 100 words of text. He said, you can write everything that's going to go under that screen if you want, but he said, "This is your product, this cube," and we were all horrified. What about the other 800 words? I do think that a lot of what Gawker is doing is moving into kind of a model where they're not that much different from what a cable TV station would look like, where the CPMs are different, where we can start to move along. But as Nick has pointed out and others, what's not ready is the ads. The ads look terrible. There are so many crappy ads all over the web, and I really think that there's been a lot of innovation on the content side, and a lot of the ads are just not keeping up.
Vidiam, we haven't heard from you yet. And we are winding down the hour already. Tell us about what you're doing at Facebook. You are the new journalism program manager. What does that mean? What do you do?
So essentially it's to partner with editorial folks. We've partnered a lot with media companies on the biz dev side, and now we're partnering with folks on the editorial side. So if they're building a news app that integrates Facebook, for example, we would work with them on that and help them figure out how they can integrate our API and how they can make it a better storytelling experience by integrating the social graph. So things like that, of that nature.
Okay, but why would they want to do that?
I think because there's been a need for it. I think a lot of news organizations, as you pointed out with the Pew study, they're getting a lot of traffic. People are discovering news through Facebook. They're getting pointed to news content through Facebook, and a lot of the folks on the editorial side have been wanting to do more experimental things. I mean, it's like this discussion we've just been having is really experimenting with the storytelling formats. I think for a long time, news sites have sort of, in a lot of ways, really replicated newspapers, but on the web. And now people are starting to get into things where it's really taking advantage of what the web has to offer.
I think it would be hard to underestimate the power of Facebook now for any media organization. I mean, when you talk about the traffic decline that we had, there were a variety of tech issues. One was that you actually couldn't share on Facebook. We used technology that added a hash-bang to a URL, which wasn't, I won't get into the specifics, it wasn't compatible with Facebook, so people couldn't click and share something. And that was...
Because Facebook is a big driver of traffic to Gawker.
That was a huge driver, and that was really
So since you've made these changes, you're
Twitter,
getting more
Facebook.
traffic from Facebook?
We've seen more and more traffic from Facebook, month to month, for a couple of years now. But it's grown exponentially, in the last 6 or 12 months. And when we have a really huge story, we can, it's often the power of Facebook that really allows it to circulate. So,
Vidiam, you were at an event at Columbia recently, and you described Facebook as a newspaper of the people. What does that mean? What did you mean by that?
What I meant was it's a platform where people, I think news has always been shared through word of mouth, and now that takes place online, and it takes place on Facebook. So you go on Facebook, and I think of it more of as a newsstand. You're able to get news from people that you know, whether it's family members, friends, your connections. Your news feed is essentially news from people. News that people are sharing and their take on the news. I think the conversation around news, as Saul so eloquently pointed out, is I think just as important as the news itself sometimes, because it helps you learn. It's part of the news now. And so when I think of newspaper of the people, it's really referring to it being a platform where people can actually easily share with their networks. And it's sort of the new word of mouth.
As Facebook becomes a more prominent driver of traffic to news websites, is there the potential there that Facebook would want to take a cut of some of the monetization that comes from that?
I don't think so. Would we take money from that the media organizations are earning? I don't think, at least right now, there are no plans to do anything like that.
I didn't mean to put you on the spot, but
Yeah, no, I understand. I think that we also get a lot of value from news organizations being on the platform. It's a better user experience. I'm personally really passionate about informing the public, right? And if a lot of people are spending a lot of time, for example, the average user spends 25 minutes a day on Facebook. That's the average user. And if a lot of people are spending time on Facebook, I think we have a responsibility to make the process of informing the public or making it easier for them to get information, making it a better user experience. And so we get a lot of value from news organizations, journalists being on the platform because they're sharing their content, making it discoverable. It's essentially a bridge to their content.
I'd like to ask one of the student helpers who is collecting cards. Can you collect? Oh, if you have some, great. Jack Dorsey, the creator of Twitter, was on this panel a couple of years ago, and he said at the time, which I thought was a great quote, he said that that he didn't think Twitter would ever replace newspapers because we will always have a need for a medium that carries more words, which is certainly good to know. While Twitter posts are 140 characters, Facebook posts are 420. Is that right?
That's right.
So is Facebook superior?
I mean, you can actually you could write out a note and
So is
post a
Facebook's-
novel if you wanted to.
So is Facebook superior to Twitter in respect to?
I think that social tools in general are making journalists' lives a lot easier. I think they all have their own strengths and weaknesses, and I think what Facebook is good at is giving the ability to essentially, for journalists, to have a Rolodex of more than 500 million people, right? It's giving you access to sources that you might not have found before. I think traditionally it's always you're working on an article, you know the 6 people you have to talk to create the article, and now through the social web and Facebook, you have access to hundreds of people, and you're able to get a more accurate story, and you're able to find sources faster. And so I think it actually, in general, I think the social web has created more efficiency in journalism.
I'm sorry. Elizabeth, the New York Observer today unveiled a new redesign of both the print newspaper and the website. What's that about?
Well, basically, if you look at the print publication for the last probably for the last year or so, the Observer moved from broadsheet format to tabloid format, which makes it feel a little bit like a magazine, but fundamentally it's not. So we had a lot of design conventions that were really better used in magazines. They look great on glossy white paper, and they look pretty awful on salmon newsprint. So a lot of what we were trying to do is just turn the Observer back into a newspaper again, as opposed to the sort of ersatz magazine. So you see a lot of design conventions that just work better on that newsprint, justified columns, lighter fonts, things like that. And then on the web, it was a lot more drastic, but mostly because I think historically the Observer's website had kind of been put together piecemeal without some sort of top-down strategy or thinking about the user experience for the reader. So what we did was try to slim it down. We have a much more minimalist site visually, if you look at it right now, but it's also much more conducive to being more aggressive in the news cycle, because the Observer's a weekly in the sense that we do put out a product once a week, or it's a very discrete product, but going forward, it's not so much that. It's in the news cycle all the time. It's breaking news on a more discrete basis in smaller chunks, but also doing long-form web exclusives. So we needed a site and a platform that would really accommodate that was faster, it was lighter, it presented the stories in a way that made them more readable and more digestible. So,
Who is your competition?
it's a variety. It depends on what specifically you're talking about. I mean, we're a general interest paper, so we have a lot of different beats. In some respects, we'll compete with trades in categories like real estate or Wall Street. For the most part, we're competing with regional New York publications, so probably New York Magazine would be one of our biggest competitors. We compete with the Times in certain beats. I had my staffers do this exercise this week where everybody had to sit down and kind of think about their competition, because the more we're in a really aggressive news-driven environment, it's more important that all the reporters at the Observer, look at what everybody else is doing competitively, because everybody's speeding up at the same time we are. And, we have to be aggressive in order to be competitive.
One of the guests here today was apparently a student or a recent graduate, and who wants to know, for those of you who are in a position to hire or who are looking at candidates to hire, what do you look for in young journalists today? Are there different skill sets than there used to be? Is it the same?
We're hiring
Is it the
by, I mean, I
traditional?
think last year AOL hired more journalists than any other company on the planet. And that's continued this year with Huffington Post, where we're hiring people. And a lot of, the vast bulk of who we're hiring are people in their 20s. And it's you have to be able to do everything today.
That's illegal, Saul.
Right.
Hiring people only in their 20s.
Okay.
Well, do everything today
do I-
means what?
I mean, you need to be able to, first of all, gather information and produce it in any medium, right? Then, video, text, photos. You need to be conversant in old-fashioned things like telephones and talking to people face-to-face, as well as Twitter. And, there's a lot of, and this is hard. I spend a lot of time with some of the younger people saying, sometimes it's better to pick up the phone. You don't have to do everything online. Right? Hearing someone's tone of voice sometimes gives you information, but this is an interesting discussion. But
I think that is actually a challenge with a lot of
Yeah.
the sort of younger generation is that they don't want to get on the phone, and they're not used to interacting with
Yeah.
people in person. And so I remember
don't
I
like
had a
talking to other
conversation
people.
with some interns a few weeks ago where I said, I remember being at an event sometime around 2002, and I saw a well-known movie mogul put an Observer reporter in a headlock after he asked him an obnoxious question, but one that should have been asked.
Harvey Weinstein, right?
Yes. And I said, how did you guess? But I said,
Wild, kooky guess.
said, I'm not saying that will happen to you, but you should be prepared for the inevitability that something like that will at some point. I think particularly if you're at a place that's aggressive with the reporting and you end up doing negative stories every now and then, even teaching people to kind of interact with subjects in a direct way or preparing them for the inevitability that they're going to have to confront those subjects later and not just deal with them over email is, that's an adjustment for a lot of people.
Coming from the blog world, did that give you a different perspective than you think a lot of the maybe traditional someone who had a background in more traditional print journalism starting out? Did that give you a different perspective, do you think, in some way? A different skill set? Did
Well, I
something
think
come out of that?
I think it made me I had more of a beat sensibility that, if something's breaking, you need it up immediately. As soon as you nail it down, you publish it. And beyond that, I mean, having the basic technology skill set was useful. But, and you learn how to self-edit, which I don't think most people learn how to do categorically, but when your mistakes are being made in public and the readers will happily tell you where you screw up, I think you become a lot more diligent about looking at copy before.
I actually think, just to sound a slightly contrary note, that the skills, in terms of what we've looked at as we've hired over the last 2.5 years, are essentially the same as they were when I started. I mean, it's about good thinking, good writing, and the ability to get information out of people who don't want to give it to you. And our best coverage comes from people who do that, and the rest of it, it's true. Most of the younger people who already come equipped to do social and work very agilely in a CMS and all of that. But if you don't, you learn it.
David, now that you're going to be a movie star, I'm going to go all TMZ on you.
You know that after this panel is over, I'm going to be talking about all this movie star stuff, Patrick.
Okay.
You just can't let it go.
Okay, well, Howard Kurtz, the longtime media columnist for the Washington Post, who had a job similar to yours, left that paper last year to join the Daily Beast. And a number of your New York Times colleagues have left the paper to join Huffington Post and other sites, such as Saul has done. Could you ever see yourself toiling for an online-only publication?
Well, I wouldn't call it toiling.
sometimes they call it toilet.
Contributing, doing...
Well, I doubt that I've worked on the web before. I worked at weeklies. I worked at an online-only site called Inside.com. The New York Times is the only daily that I've ever worked for. But while I've been there, they've been I have the attention span of a gnat, and they've been able to accommodate. You know, I covered the Oscars for 4 years. I made weekly videos as a carpetbagger. I came up with the idea that we need daily videos about the media, and they set up a studio in my basement. Now, they ended up looking like hostage videos. They were horrible, but at least it was like, the whole attitude at the New York Times right now is, hey, let's give it a whirl. And the idea that, you know, I'm doing a story right now about Buck, this guy, documentary about this guy who's kind of a horse whisperer. I'm doing something about a Broadway play. I'm doing something for the magazine. I can go to the web anytime I want. I don't know why I would lane change. I guess for more money, but if I wanted more money, I probably wouldn't look in journalism. It's probably not a great place to go. And to add $50,000 on the margin of what I do, it wouldn't be life-changing. My children might like it, but I don't think much would change. For me, one thing I just wanted to address so quickly about the hiring of young people. The tools are in your hand, and so walking up to people and with, you know, a couple of clips and some letters of a recommendation. I hired at Weeklies forever, and what I would be saying now is, you know, damn whatever you say, show me what you've done. And I want to see what you've done. And I don't care if it was, you know, the off-the-hook trip you and your buddies took to Bonnaroo, or, you know, the audio file that you made while you were building houses in El Salvador, whatever you got going. Just don't show me your blog about your cat, you know, show me something that you made, that you built, that demonstrates an actual ability to take things and make stuff. That's what people want.
Your colleague at the Times, Brian Stelter, wrote a piece this past week about how Glenn Beck, after he leaves Fox News and he's going to do his own thing online, and he's going to charge a subscription fee for it to make that into a business. And actually that made me think, I remember Bonnie Fuller, the magazine editor, was on this panel a couple of years ago, and she said she believes that that's going to be the future for a lot of people going online, establishing a brand name for themselves and then doing their own thing online. Is that a potential?
I think
Are we
that's
a
a
long ways
real
away from
rare.
that? Of course.
I mean, I have a lot of. I have what 330,000 followers on Twitter. That's great. Twitter doesn't pay that great so far. You know, I have a
So
lot of
that
friends.
kind of future is really not here yet.
Well, some people have pulled
Saul,
it
do
off.
you- Saul, do you
Malik
disagree?
has.
Look, what did the internet do, right? The internet eliminated barriers of distribution, so the whole phenomenon here is anybody can say anything to anybody else. The media business is just people who have stuff to say, maybe because they found something out, or maybe because they're just thinking deep thoughts, or they're showing, you know, you're snapping a picture. So everybody is a publisher, everybody is a brand, right? Are there things that organize, you know, so can I build a media, you know, Glenn Beck, nobody heard of him.
Matt Drudge, who
Right,
apparently
so,
drives
right, Ariana,
more traffic than
but
even Facebook.
Then there are things that
is-
you can do
so.
in building organizations. Right? There's lots of people who have an overarching sensibility and then build an organization behind it. Martha Stewart did that. I mean, you know, there's lots of people and all through, you know.
So we're going to see DavidCarr.com pretty soon.
Or David will come up with it. He will be Nick Denton. Or Nick Denton will be Nick Denton, right? There's nothing new here. People always start new things. It's easier if you've got something. There's the barriers to entry. You don't have to go pay somebody $10 million to get on Comcast if you want to start a TV network. I can start a TV network tomorrow by putting video on the web, right? So there's certain business models, you know, so there's going to be a lot more competition, so you have to stand out from the noise more, right? Everybody can have a blog, and that doesn't mean you're guaranteed that more than, you know, your friends are going to read it, if that. So
I think you got to be careful about that sort of, you know, brand X. Will get. I think David Carr is interested, stapled to the New York Times. There's contextual value in federating those brands that there might not be in a lone vertical called. I might launch DavidCarr.com and hear nothing but crickets. I mean, it just. I'm ever mindful that a lot of my traction comes from the fact that my homepage alone can drive traffic like a fire hose, and I've seen people get confused about the value of their own brand versus Mother Times, and it's always a little bit of a shock to them, I think, when they no longer work there.
Well, on that note, I'm afraid we've run out of our hour already. So I want to thank you all for coming, and thank you very much for the panelists for taking time to talk with us today. I wish we could have gone longer. Thank you very much, everybody, for coming.